Good morning and welcome to Crash Course. Today we're covering the Protestant Reformation and its impacts on Christianity around the world. From about 500 CE, the Roman Catholic Church had been at its peak power and influence across Europe. The church ran facilities such as schools, orphanages, and hospitals, allowing it to continuously consolidate power. However, in 1517, a German monk by the name of Martin Luther criticized the Catholic Church's sale of indulgences, which were like get-out-of-jail-free cards for anyone who desired a guaranteed ride into heaven when they died. Luther believed the church could not pardon people's sins and that people could only be saved by God and His grace. During that time, the church used indulgences in order to get money from citizens, and often members of the church would skim a little off the top. To protest, Martin Luther nailed the Disputation on the Power and Efficacy of Indulgences, or more commonly known as the 95 Theses, on the door of the Roman Catholic Church. When people saw the 95 Theses, they realized the church was lying to them, and that they started to question the church and break off into Lutheranism. The citizens were able to break off from the Catholic Church because of the printing press. The printing press became a tool for religious figures to translate the Latin and Hebrew Bibles into vernacular languages, which were more common languages spoken among ordinary citizens, so that people could interpret the meaning for themselves.
Lutheranism emphasizes an individual's connection with God rather than the people's contribution to the church. This concept is known as the priesthood of all believers, meaning everyone has the ability to access God through Christ instead of only priests and higher-ranking church officials. Lutherans believe in celebrating the sacraments of baptism and Holy Communion. Preaching is a major part of the religious practice because they believe that people's understanding of the religion is mostly dependent on the way that the preacher recites the script. Lutheranism quickly spread with the Lutherans, quickly becoming one of the top types of Christianity in Europe over a few years.
In 1521, a diet or assembly was held in the German city of Worms to decide how to approach Martin Luther's criticisms of the church. Luther attended the diet, and after being asked to repudiate his works, he stood firmly and refused to do so. The attendees of the diet would then decide to excommunicate Martin Luther and ban his works. Luther was named a heretic but still seen as a hero by some.
With the breakout of the Protestant Reformation across Europe, King Henry VIII of England saw the opportunity to break away from the Catholic Church in order to form his own church and divorce his wife. This would mark the beginning of the English Reformation. King Henry had previously attempted to divorce Catherine of Aragon due to the concern that he would not be able to have a son to continue his bloodline. However, Pope Clement VII refused to annul the marriage, and the king was enraged. Henry proceeded to get divorced by a Protestant church official instead of, and married Anne Boleyn, Catherine's younger sister. This is what led King Henry to break away from the Roman Catholic Church. Siding with Protestant reformers, King Henry VIII convinced Parliament to name him the head of the Church of England. This meant the Roman Catholic Church no longer held supreme power in England. Also, as head of the Church of England, King Henry VIII seized the land that monasteries were on, as well as the riches inside them. He disbanded the monasteries and claimed that their income, which became known as the dissolution of monasteries. As you can imagine, the shift of power during the English Reformation radically changed the course of history in Europe and eventually across the world. One major historical time period that was influenced by the Protestant Reformation was the Renaissance.
Beginning in the 14th century in Italy, the Renaissance marked the time period of a drastic rebirth in art, science, politics, and religion. This meant that classical thinkers and traditions were being referenced more often during this time period, while new ideas also flourished. Galileo Galilei, an Italian astronomer and significant figure of the Renaissance, is one example of the influence of church criticism. As people began to skepticize about the church, the works of scientists became increasingly influential. Galileo is well known for his discovery of heliocentrism, which was an idea that was very unpopular with the Catholic Church because it disproved their every explanation of the solar system. However, the concept was popular in the public because more people had already become skeptical about the Church after the Protestant Reformation.
Galileo is not the only example of this phenomenon. Artists of the Renaissance also drifted away from traditional church beliefs after the Protestant Reformation. For example, Peter Bruegel, a Dutch Renaissance painter, is famous for his paintings depicting peasant life and the lower class, as well as nature. These things became more popular in the paintings after the Protestant Reformation because the church criticism drove people away from religious paintings and towards secular art. This movement that this pattern causes is known as the humanism because of the increased depiction of humans in secular scenes. The humanist time period is a direct result of the Protestant Reformation because people were less strictly involved with the Roman Catholic Church and began to desire the type of artwork that had no religious ties or inspiration.
The Protestant Reformation would also go on to influence the late era of the Renaissance, also known as the Enlightenment, because of new liberal values that were voiced and spread by the Enlightenment philosophers. Protestant Reformation skepticism and emphasis on overcoming corruption were reconsidered during the Enlightenment, inspiring a new emphasis on democracy, individualism, and human rights.
After Martin Luther broke off from the Roman Catholic Church to form the religion of Lutheranism, many others followed in his footsteps. This is why there's so many branches or denominations of Protestantism in the modern day. We see churches that are Baptist, Lutheran, and Methodist. One of these denominations is Calvinism. There's a branch of Protestantism started by John Calvin in the early 1500s. One major difference between Calvinism and Lutheranism is the Calvinist concept of predestination, which is the belief that every person who follows the religion is predestined for whatever future God has planned for them. This means that they do not believe in having to follow a strict moral code to get into heaven. The Protestant Reformation made it possible for all of these new denominations to be formed because it proved to people that they could follow their own beliefs rather than choose someone else to follow them.
Though the Protestant Reformation opened doors for people to think freely and live with the separation between church and state, it also led to violence between Catholics and Protestants. One example of this kind of conflict is the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, which occurred in Paris in 1572. The massacre was planned by Catherine de' Medici, a member of the infamous Medici family of the Italian Renaissance. Roman Catholic nobles and citizens carried out the slaughter of thousands of members of a Protestant group known as the French Huguenots. Though this was one of the worst cases of Protestant and Catholic civil conflict, it was certainly not the last.
In conclusion, a German monk by the name of Martin Luther criticized the Roman Catholic Church. Specifically, he criticized their sale of indulgences. To do this, he nailed the 95 Theses on their door. This would later go on to be called the Protestant Reformation, and King Henry VIII would side with the Protestants and break away from the Roman Catholic Church as well. The Protestant Reformation would then go on to influence the Renaissance, specifically the end of the Renaissance, which was known as the Enlightenment. It would influence the Enlightenment because ideals regarding democracy and individualism were emphasized during the Protestant Reformation.
So are you aware that Martin Luther King was a very important American figure and was the key figure in ending the segregation?
Yes.
So what do you think about the way his 95 Theses influenced this process?
People will read it and they will understand the problem and they will be able to vote their own ways.
Did you know that Martin Luther King actually did not write the 95 Theses? It was a different Martin Luther.
Excuse me, do you like the Protestant Reformation or the 95 Theses more? Well, did you know that they're actually the same thing?
Hey Myrtle, who do you think had the greatest impact on the Protestant Reformation? And you better not say fish. Okay, thank you.